come from lines of credit at Goldman, Chase, AgTrust, Amarillo National, Pinnacle Bank.
The more we dig, the more loans we find. We just can't figure out how he's paying the loans.
Well, can't we just call Alan? Call Alan and ask him.
I've been calling him.
Most likely this is a strategy to limit tax liability, but the immediate problem is the funds don't exist in any of the accounts we've found to initiate the offshore drilling.
She fired him, looked him in the eye, handed him a termination, and moved on like it was nothing. Like the man who had kept MTEX breathing for years was just a name on a piece of paper she no longer needed. And then, before he even had time to clear out his office, she picked up the phone and tried to replace him. That is the decision that Season 2 of Landman built everything around. That is the decision the finale made her pay for. And now, with Season 3 locked in and the ground already shifting underneath everyone, the question is not whether Cammy is going to feel the weight of what she did. The question is how badly it is going to break her when she finally does. Because Tommy Norris did not sit down and wait for someone to rescue him. He did not go back to a big oil company and take a comfortable title and a salary and disappear quietly into someone else's machine. He did something nobody expected. He built his own. And the moment he put CTT oil exploration and cattle into the world, with his son Cooper as president and his own father overseeing drilling, and every single person who had ever been loyal to him standing in that company's foundation, everything changed. Not just for Tommy, for Cammy, for MTEX, for every power dynamic the show has been slowly constructing since the very first episode. The man she threw away is no longer knocking on her door asking for his job back. He is standing across the field in his own company, with his own money, with Galino's $62 million behind him, and with every capable person she drove away from MTEX now building something that is going to outlast everything she is still desperately trying to hold together. That is not a subplot. That is the entire Season 3 story, and it starts right now. To understand exactly what Season 3 is walking into, you have to understand what Season 2 actually built, because a lot of people watched that finale and saw a happy ending. Tommy launched his company, his family is together, Cooper is free, the sun goes down, and there is almost something peaceful about the last few minutes of that episode. And on the surface, that reads like resolution. But if you were watching the way the show was actually laying its foundation, you know that the finale of Season 2 was not a conclusion, it was a setup. Every single thing that happened in those final moments was a loaded gun being placed carefully on a table that Season 3 is eventually going to have to pick up. And the most dangerous of all those loaded guns is the one nobody is talking about enough. CTT Oil Exploration and Cattle is not just a new company, it is a direct threat to everything Cammy has left. Think about what Tommy actually did when he walked out of that MTEX meeting and started making phone calls. He did not just launch a business, he systematically dismantled the human infrastructure that Cammy was still depending on to keep MTEX functional. Nate resigned. Not reluctantly, not hesitantly. He sat across from Cammy, looked at what she had become and what she was doing to the company Monty had spent his life building, and he told her the truth she had been refusing to hear since the moment she took over. Monty did not design MTEX to outlive him. Nate did not say that to be cruel. He said it because it was accurate, and because he understood something Cammy had never been willing to admit. The structure of MTEX was built around specific people doing specific things in specific ways. Remove those people and replace them with loyalty tests and power moves and the need to prove something, and the whole architecture starts to buckle. Cammy had been removing those people one by one since the beginning of Season 2. Nate's resignation was not a surprise to anyone who had been paying attention. It was the inevitable conclusion of a pattern Cammy established the moment she started letting her insecurity run the company, instead of her judgment. And then, those people did not just disappear into the industry, they walked directly into CTT. They took their expertise, their relationships, their institutional knowledge, and their genuine loyalty, and they handed it to Tommy. Rebecca became chief operating officer and chief counsel. Nate became treasurer. Dale took exploration. Boss took the crew. TL took drilling. Every single one of those roles is a function that MTEX still desperately needs and no longer has the people to fill properly. Cami did not just lose Tommy when she fired him. She set a chain reaction in motion that cost her almost everyone around him. And she is heading into Season 3 running a company with a 10% chance of success on her offshore rig gamble, no financial mind she can trust, no operational backbone that can hold under real pressure, and a rival company run by the exact people she drove away, sitting right there in the same oil patch, watching everything she does. That is not a comfortable position. That is a countdown. What makes this so dangerous for Cami in Season 3 is not just that CTT exists, it's that CTT is built on something MTEX has not had in a very long time: trust. Real, earned, non-transactional trust between people who actually want to be there. When Tommy stood in front of that crew at Cooper's Well 6 and laid out the structure of the company, there was no confusion about what was being built or why. Cooper as president, Tommy as senior vice president, 25% of profits going into a pool for the workers. Every person in that circle understood exactly what they were signing up for because Tommy had spent years showing them through his actions who he was and how he operated. There was no doubt in any of those rooms. There was no one quietly updating their resume or waiting to see which direction the wind was blowing. Every single person there chose to be there, which is a thing Cami cannot say about anyone still standing inside MTEX. And that difference is going to matter enormously in Season 3, because running an oil company in the Texas patch is not a clean or predictable business. The ground shifts, deals fall apart, problems arrive at 2 in the morning and need to be solved before 6. You need people around you who are not just competent, but who are in it. People who aren't calculating their exit while they're executing your plan. Cami has been bleeding those people out of MTEX for an entire season. Tommy rebuilt them into something new. And now Season 3 has to deal with the reality of what that means when both of those companies are operating in the same space, competing for the same resources, and carrying the full weight of the decisions that brought them both to where they are. Let's talk about Tommy Norris specifically, because this is the part that the Season 3 story is really built on top of. And if you do not fully understand who Tommy is at his core, you will miss why what he is doing with CTT is so much more significant than just starting a new business. Tommy is not a man who builds things for personal glory. He's not someone who needs his name on the door or his title on the organizational chart to feel like he matters. What Tommy needs is the problem in front of him and the right people around him to solve it. That is his entire identity. That is the thing that made him indispensable to Monty, irreplaceable to MTEX, and genuinely dangerous to anyone who assumes losing his title means losing his power. The way Tommy operates, the title was always the least important part of the equation. What made him valuable was the instinct, the judgment, the ability to walk into a room where everything was already going wrong and start quietly fixing it before anyone had finished explaining what broke. You cannot separate that out of him by handing him a termination. You cannot take the competence by escorting him out the door. All you can do is redirect it. And Cami, by firing him, redirected all of that straight into her competition. CTT Oil Exploration and Cattle is Tommy finally doing the thing he was always capable of doing, but never needed to do before, because as long as he had a structure worth protecting and people worth fighting for inside that structure, he stayed inside someone else's machine. The moment Cami made it clear that loyalty was not going to be rewarded and competence was not going to be respected, she removed the only reasons Tommy had to stay inside someone else's machine. And what came out on the other side of that decision is a version of Tommy that is significantly more dangerous than the one who was keeping MTEX functional from inside the building. Because here's what's different now. Tommy is not managing someone else's chaos. He's not absorbing someone else's bad decisions and trying to quietly fix the damage before it becomes a crisis. He is building for himself, for his son, for his father, and for the people he chose to stand in that field with him. And that specific kind of motivation, building something for the people you love, rather than maintaining something for the person who pays you, changes how a man makes every decision. It sharpens everything. Tommy was already one of the most capable operators in the Texas oil patch. Put him in a situation where he's fighting for his family's future rather than managing someone else's inheritance, and that capability gets focused in a way that MTEX never actually got to see. Season 3 is going to show us what Tommy looks like when he's not holding back, when he's not trying to stay in his lane or avoid stepping on Cammie's pride or soften the delivery of hard truths to protect someone else's feelings, when he's just out there in the oil field, doing what he does with the people he trusts, building something that has his family's name on it. That is a different show, not because the setting changes or the stakes become unfamiliar, but because the engine driving everything has Now let's turn to Cammie, because her story in Season 3 is not a simple one, and it does not deserve to be reduced to just consequence and regret, even though both of those things are absolutely going to be present. What makes Cammie's position at the start of Season 3 genuinely compelling is not just that she made bad decisions in Season 2, it is that she made them while trying as hard as she could. That distinction matters more than people give it credit for. Cammie was not careless, she was not indifferent, she was not lazy or disengaged in a casual way. She was working constantly, pushing herself, putting her personal pride and her sense of identity on the line every single day in a world that had never been built with her at the center of it. The oil industry is not a forgiving space for anyone. For a woman who stepped into power through grief rather than through years of climbing the ladder in that world, it is almost unimaginably unforgiving. And Cammie walked into that environment carrying the full weight of Monty's legacy, the expectations of people who had built their careers around him, the skepticism of an industry that was waiting to see if she would collapse, and her own desperate need to prove that she was more than just his widow. That is not a small thing to carry. That is the kind of weight that can distort even good judgment. The problem was not that she was trying. The problem was that she was trying to prove something rather than trying to build something. And those two motivations lead to completely different places. Season 3 starts with the fallout of that distinction sitting directly on her desk. The offshore rig gamble is still in play, but Nate's own assessment, and Nate does not deal in anything but reality, is that the math on that project is brutal. The corrosion risk is real, the sanctions exposure is real, the sludge probability is real. Cammie is betting MTEX's remaining credibility on a project that even her most financially precise advisor, before he resigned, called a long shot at best. And she is doing it without Nate, without Tommy, without the people who understood the financial engine of that company better than anyone. She is doing it essentially alone, which is exactly what her Season 2 arc was slowly building toward without her realizing it. She systematically cleared the room of everyone who might have told her she was wrong, and now the room is empty, and the problem is still there. That is the specific kind of lonely that does not have an obvious solution. You cannot go back and unfill all those decisions. You cannot unhire the wrong people or undismiss the right ones. You have to stand in front of what you chose and figure out what comes next. And what comes next for Cammie in Season 3 is a reckoning that has been earning interest since the day she took over. She still has the trust fund. Monty made sure of that. Even if MTEX collapses entirely and the offshore rig fails and the company gets sold for parts, Cammie is not going to be left with nothing. That golden parachute is real, and it is significant. But money and peace are different things. And what Cammie is heading into Season 3 without is not money. It is the thing that she has been chasing since the beginning of this story, the proof that she could run something, build something, lead something real. Losing MTEX is not just a financial event for Cami. It is the final answer to the question she has been asking herself since Monty died. And if that answer comes back negative, if the offshore rig fails and the company has to sell and CTT is thriving on the same land that MTEX once dominated, the weight of that specific reality is going to be heavier than anything money can cushion. That is the emotional core of Cami's Season 3 story. Not whether she survives financially, because she probably does, but whether she survives the truth of what her choices actually cost her, and whether she is finally willing to sit with that truth instead of running from it the way she spent all of Season 2 running from every warning, every voice, every piece of evidence that she was heading somewhere she did not want to end up. Season 3 is the moment the running stops, not because someone forces it to stop, but because there is nowhere left to run. The dynamic between Tommy and Cami in Season 3 is where everything the show has been building is finally going to arrive, and it is a dynamic that does not have a simple shape. This is not a clean revenge story. Tommy is not sitting across from Cami calculating how to destroy her. That is not who he is. Tommy does not burn things down, he builds things. The destruction is a byproduct of the construction, not the goal of it. Every move Tommy makes in Season 3 is going to be about CTT, about his family, about protecting the people Galeno has now placed in the crosshairs by giving that $62 million. Cami and MTEX are going to fall in and out of that picture not because Tommy is targeting her, but because they are operating in the same industry, on the same land, in the same patch, and the collapse of MTEX has real implications for what CTT can and cannot access. That practical reality is going to force these two people back into the same room, not because either of them wants to be there, but because the oil patch does not care about their